Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive, where we take a stack of sources and pull out the really interesting stuff. Today, we are doing a deep dive into the brand new Nintendo Switch 2 specifically. What early hands-on impressions and answers to pressing questions tell us about this console.
And our source material is, well, it's exactly what you need for that kind of insight. We're working from the transcript of a recent YouTube video where gaming experts had some real, actual hands-on time with a test unit and then dug into answering listener questions based on that crucial experience.
Exactly. So our mission today is simple. Cut through all the online chatter and go straight to the source to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge directly from people who have touched the device. New hardware launches generate a ton of buzz, and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. We're here to give you the core information you need.
Right, and just to give you context for the information we're pulling from, the expert in the source mentioned they'd only received their Switch 2 test unit that Wednesday morning relative to when the video was recorded.
So, like, really fresh off the truck. But they weren't totally blind going in, right?
No. They had a full-day preview event beforehand,
What?
which sounds essential.
Mm-hmm.
That's where they got their initial hands-on time, messed with system settings, tried game chat, and just started getting a feel for the hardware itself.
Right, getting the basics down.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they made it very clear that the testing for a full review is still very much ongoing. They aren't rushing it, and that's important because, as they put it, there's a lot to dig into with this new console.
Makes sense.
So what we're getting here is a crucial look at initial impressions and answers to pressing questions based on the significant testing they have managed so far.
That sets the stage perfectly. So let's jump into the kinds of questions listeners were asking, the ones you might have. First up, a very practical one for anyone considering this purchase, choosing the right TV.
Yes. A listener named Jose specifically wanted to know if the Samsung S90D, which is a popular QD OLED model, was going to be the best TV to pair with the Switch 2.
Okay. And the key takeaway from the expert's answer sounds like you don't need to break the bank.
Precisely. Don't feel pressured to buy the most bleeding-edge, expensive TV just for this console. They confirmed the Samsung S90D is a great option, yeah.
Highlighted its QD OLED panel, which is fantastic for vibrant colors, something Nintendo games are known for.
Right,
It comes in common sizes like 55, 65, and 77 inches. But the crucial point was that you don't need to overspend on specs you typically look for with, say, a PS5 or Xbox Series X.
Why is that? What did the source say about the tech requirements? Is it the HDMI spec or?
Yeah, basically. While the Switch 2 does support 4K output, and some games might hit faster refresh rates, the core performance, like 4K at 60 frames per second, is well within the capabilities of HDMI 2.0.
Ah.
The newer HDMI 2.1 ports you find on the priciest TVs aren't strictly necessary for the Switch 2's main use cases.
So you don't need HDMI 2.1's higher bandwidth for things like uncompressed 4K 120Hz, which the Switch 2 isn't really targeting anyway. Exactly. The expert noted that when the Switch 2 does utilize higher refresh rates, it'll likely be at lower resolutions, like 1080p maybe, which again, HDMI 2.0 handles comfortably.
Gotcha.
So if you have a good quality TV from the last few years with HDMI 2.0, you're probably set.
That's a relief for the wallet. So QD OLED is great for color if that's a priority, but don't buy a TV just for HDMI 2.1 for the Switch 2. What other TV options did the source mention? Any budget ones?
Yeah, they covered a few. Beyond the S90D, they mentioned Samsung's 2025 S85F as another QD OLED option. Maybe not quite as bright as the S90D, but still great. LG C-Series OLEDs also got a nod as excellent gaming TVs that have improved significantly.
Those are always popular.
And importantly, for budget-conscious buyers, they pointed to mini LED options from TCL and Hisense, which also come in under $1,000.
Oh, nice.
The TCL QM6K was specifically called out in a review mentioned in the source as offering great value and brightness for the price.
Excellent. So, the takeaway on TVs, prioritize a good panel for colors if you can, but you can probably skip the bleeding edge HDMI 2.1 unless you need it for other consoles. Now, let's shift from the visuals on your screen to something much more tactile and, frankly, a little weird. The Joy-Con mouse functionality.
Yeah, this is a question from a listener named Corey who cut right to the chase. Is it actually usable or just another classic Nintendo gimmick that's, useless without a keyboard?
Oh, Nintendo has certainly given us some unique control schemes over the years. The Wii U gamepad definitely comes to mind. Or even Wii motion controls sometimes.
Exactly. The expert in the source admitted their initial thought process was just that, here we go, another 3DS 3D slider, or, yeah, Wii motion controls. Cool idea, but will anyone actually use it?
But that's not how it played out. It sounds like it surprised them.
Not at all. Their actual experience.
Right.
Way better than you're probably expecting. That's a direct quote.
Okay, now you've got my attention. What makes it surprisingly good? What's the deal?
A couple of things stood out in the source. First, they described it as pinpoint accurate. Apparently, that little foot slide on the bottom of the Joy-Con moves like an actual mouse on a surface.
Like a real mouse, not just gyro pointing. That's the surprising detail.
It is. And you can use it everywhere, not just in games.
Yeah.
It controls the home screen and menus like a mouse on a computer. And they said it works fantastically well.
Yeah.
And get this, they even tested it on their jeans, just resting it on their leg.
On jeans.
Yeah. And it moved very smoothly.
Okay, that detail alone makes me think this isn't just some throwaway feature they tacked on.
Right. It sounds like it actually tracks properly.
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting and distinctly Nintendo. You can use two Joy-Cons simultaneously for a kind of two-mouse experience, something you can't easily do on PC.
Two mice? What kind of game would even use that? How does that work?
Well, the expert gave examples from games they tested. In a rhythm mini game within the Bravely Default remaster, you use each Joy-Con to control a different end of a line you're manipulating.
Huh.
And in another game, Drag and Drive, you control two wheelchair wheels individually with separate Joy-Cons. And then you can seamlessly switch to gyro aiming when needed.
Okay, that's genuinely creative problem solving, using the hardware, not just mimicking something else.
It really is. And they also confirmed it's useful for traditional aiming, too. They said Metroid Prime 4, for example, works incredibly well with mouse aiming using just a single Joy-Con.
So it sounds like it works well because Nintendo and maybe third parties are building specific experiences around it rather than just expecting it to replace a keyboard and mouse for existing PC genres. Is that the idea?
Precisely. It's not meant to fully replace a classic PC setup, no. But it opens up new control possibilities, like those two Joy-Con mouse experiences. Or it provides an alternative, potentially very accurate aiming method for games designed to support it. They also noted that controller-friendly PC ports, like Civilization 7, worked really well with the single mouse functionality for navigating menus and stuff.
So the experts' take is that it's not a gimmick. They're actually impressed.
Not a gimmick at all. They called it really creative. While the two-mouse scheme might remain a niche Nintendo thing, they saw a lot of potential for third-party developers, leveraging the single mouse functionality, especially for shooters and strategy games.
Wow. That's a surprisingly positive insight for a feature that, yeah, initially sounded like pure novelty.
Okay, moving from creative control to performance.
Mm-hmm.
What about older games? Your existing Switch library. Will they get a boost?
Yeah, listener RMO 98808 asked exactly that. If games not specifically getting a Switch 2 update would see automatic performance improvements just by being played on the new hardware.
The classic question with new consoles, right?
Right.
What's the word from the source?
The answer is yes, but it's nuanced and case by case. Nintendo confirmed to the expert that games will receive natural boosts simply from running on the more powerful hardware.
Okay, what does natural boost actually mean in practice? Are we talking frame rates, loading times? The experts speculated it would primarily manifest as small loading time improvements. Maybe slightly better natural resolution in some cases if the game wasn't already locked down too tightly by the developer.
Right, but don't expect like a night and day difference on just any old game you pop in.
Exactly. They stressed that any pronounced boosts, like big graphical jumps or frame rate overhauls, would really depend on the developer patching the game or releasing a specific Switch 2 edition. You shouldn't expect major changes without that specific support.
Okay, like the example they mentioned with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. That had a specific edition, right?
Yes, exactly. That was cited as what a proper Switch 2 edition can achieve. The expert had seen examples showing significant improvements in things like character density on screen, draw distance, smoother resolution, and a much better frame rate compared to how it runs on the original Switch. It looks way, way better when the developer optimizes for the new hardware.
Gotcha. So if you just put your old game cart into the Switch 2, you'll likely get, what, a minor bonus?
Pretty much. Yeah. A tiny boost. They said it would probably be most noticeable in loading times. Their advice was essentially don't bank on it for transformative changes, but you'll see something hopefully. Interestingly, they speculated that games that were in the worst shape performance-wise on the original Switch might actually see the most noticeable subtle improvements just from having more headroom.
Okay, so don't rebuy your whole library expecting wonders, but appreciate any small bumps you might get, especially in loading. Good to know. Let's talk about the screen itself. Compared to the much-loved Switch OLED, how does the new one stack up?
Yeah, FairyKit64 asked about this. The expert was very clear about their starting point. They love the Switch OLED screen. They found the original Switch screen washed out and terrible in comparison. High praise for the OLED.
So the big question, how does the new Switch 2 screen, which we know is LCD, not OLED, compare to that? Is it a step back?
Their initial impression is that it's pretty good, despite being LCD, and crucially, way, way, way better than the original Switch screen.
Okay, way, way, way better than the original is good. Why such a jump in quality for an LCD panel, though?
Simply put, LCD technology has advanced that much since the original Switch launched way back in 2017. 7 years is a lifetime ago for displays, as they put it. Modern LCD panels are just completely different and far more capable.
What specific improvements did they see or know about? Is it just brightness or...
Well, the new screen has more capable tech overall. It includes VRR support variable refresh rate.
Oh, that's huge for smoothness.
Yeah, it helps sync the display's refresh rate with the game's frame rate, reducing stutter and tearing. And it has a 120 Hz refresh rate, which is higher than even the Switch OLED. In their testing so far, they've seen really vibrant colors, great contrast, and confirmed it avoids that washed-out look and kind of white film effect that plagued the original screen.
That's excellent news for anyone maybe worried about stepping down from OLED quality if they have the OLED model now.
Exactly. They still need to do more side-by-side comparisons in various games for their full review, obviously. But the initial feeling is that while it might not match OLED's perfect black levels, the overall quality jump from the original Switch is substantial, and the gap to the OLED isn't nearly as vast as the jump to the OLED was from the original screen, if that makes sense. You won't have that problem with the washed-out look anymore.
Okay, solid improvement then. A modern LCD doing its job well. Sounds promising. Now let's look at physical connections. The Switch 2 has additional USB slots. What can we actually plug into them? Any confirmation?
Kenneth Chung wanted to know what third-party accessories could be confidently used with the extra USB ports. The expert admitted they still have a lot of testing to do on this front and plan to plug in a bunch of stuff, so still early days there.
Did Nintendo confirm compatibility for anything specific yet? Like maybe that old GameCube adapter?
Yes. Supposedly, Nintendo confirmed that the old GameCube adapter for Super Smash Bros. Ultimate will work just fine via USB, which is great news for Smash players.
Okay, good.
The expert noted they haven't personally tested that specific piece of hardware yet, just relaying what Nintendo said.
Fair enough. What about other common devices? Keyboards, webcams?
What they do know for sure, directly from Nintendo, is that the USB port supports some web cameras, which is interesting.
Some. Okay.
Yeah, there's even a camera test function built right into the Switch 2's settings menu, so you can plug in a USB camera and see if it's detected and working right there.
So webcam support is confirmed, but with that caveat of some, why is Nintendo being, as the source put it, creaky about confirming everything works?
Well, as the expert explained, it's simply because there's just so much variation in third-party USB devices out there. Nintendo can't realistically test and guarantee every single webcam or every single type of USB, hub, keyboard, or mouse will work flawlessly.
Right. Too many variables.
Exactly. And the expert doesn't have every device to test either, which is why they can't give a universal yes just yet.
What other potential devices did they mention wanting to test?
They specifically mentioned wanting to test things like Legion glasses, those AR glasses that can act as an external display. They work with phones and the Steam Deck, apparently.
Ah, interesting.
The general expectation, or hope maybe, is that things compatible with the Steam Deck, another handheld PC device using standard ports, will hopefully work here, but again, that requires more testing.
Okay, so the USB ports seem promising for broader compatibility than the old Switch, including confirmed support for some webcams, but yeah, extensive testing is still needed to build a comprehensive list of compatible third-party devices.
That's the key takeaway for now. The fact that webcams are supported and testable suggests it's not totally locked down, but it's definitely not a guarantee for every single gadget you might own.
All right, let's talk about a persistent question for any handheld: battery life.
Right.
How long does the Switch 2 battery last, especially if you're pushing it hard? Say, high performance like 1080p at 120 frames per second.
Yeah, this is another area where they couldn't give a final, definitive answer yet. Just too early.
Why is that?
Well, to test high-performance battery drain properly, they need games that actually run at those specific demanding specs, like 1080p, 120 fps. and those weren't widely available at the time of their hands-on testing.
Okay, so they haven't been able to really stress test it yet. What did Nintendo's official estimates say, though?
Nintendo's own estimates are apparently pretty low and fairly conservative, putting the low end of expected battery life somewhere around 2 to 2.5 hours.
That's not a huge amount. Similar to the original Switch on demanding games, then.
Very much seems that way. And the experts' expectation based on that, they anticipate that running games at maximum performance, like 1080p 120fps, and using demanding features like game chat concurrently will definitely drain the battery pretty fast.
Yeah, that makes sense. So not a huge departure from the current Switch, where performance really impacts batteries significantly.
Oh, yeah, right. Seems like a similar trade-off. They plan to conduct rigorous battery testing for their full review, of course, noting that the actual life will always be case by case, depending on the specific game and the settings being used.
Okay, battery life numbers are still pending real-world high-performance testing. Understood. Finally, what about accessories? Any recommendations for getting started? Screen protectors, cases, that sort of thing?
Listener Jake asked about this. The expert confirmed there are already tons of both official Nintendo and third-party accessories available or announced, with many more surely on the way.
Any official ones stand out as must-haves, according to the source?
They strongly recommended the official Nintendo Pro controller as a day-one pickup.
Oh, yeah. Why is that?
They particularly liked the addition of back buttons, finally, and also an audio jack, which they felt was a really necessary improvement over the original Pro controller.
The audio jack is definitely welcome.
For basic protection, they thought Nintendo's official carrying case bundle that includes a screen protector offered good bang for your buck. They generally felt the initial official Nintendo lineup was pretty good overall.
Okay. And third-party options? Anything they've seen or recommend yet, or is it too early?
Well, the big wave of third-party accessories is just beginning, and they expect quality and innovation to improve over time, as always. However, they did specifically call out one product they've tried already, D-Brand's Kill Switch.
Ah, yes, the Kill Switch. That sounds like a pretty heavy-duty option. What's included in that?
It's a really comprehensive package, yeah.
Where?
Described as a pretty good deal for everything you get. It includes a screen protector, a robust case cover for the console itself, which has a pass-through for the kickstand,
Okay.
a game card holder add-on that snaps onto the case, ergonomic grips for the Joy-Cons that are removable, and even a special dock adapter so you can keep the case on while docking the Switch too.
Wow, that is quite a complete package. Sounds like a high-end starting point if you want serious protection and maybe better ergonomics.
It is. They called it a high-end case, offering good ergonomics and protection, and basically a solid recommendation if you're looking for something like that early on. They also mentioned hoping to see third-party accessories that could potentially make the Joy-Cons feel more like traditional ergonomic computer mice, to better utilize that mouse functionality we talked about.
That's an interesting idea. So yeah, the Kill Switch sounds like a strong contender for anyone wanting comprehensive protection and improved ergonomics right from the start.
Definitely seems like it. And as they noted, expect the accessory market to just explode and evolve significantly as developers and manufacturers get more hands-on time with the console itself.
So the expert in the source is clearly busy putting the console through its paces. What games did they mention testing specifically? Just curious what they're playing.
They were playing Mario Kart World, which they said was really fun, unsurprisingly, and also the Nintendo Switch 2 Welcome Tour.
The Welcome Tour? What's that?
They hilariously described it as much more fun than it has any right to be, apparently. Said it was informative, but maybe overpriced at $10. Plus, they mentioned testing tons of third-party games as well.
Gotcha. And they're taking their time for the full review, which is definitely reassuring. You don't want rushed verdicts on new hardware.
Absolutely. They reiterated wanting to do the most thorough testing possible before giving a final verdict.
Well, this has been a fascinating deep dive, pulling very specific details directly from that initial hands-on Q&A source. We've covered everything from picking the right TV and the surprisingly usable Joy-Con mouse to how older games might perform and what accessories are worth looking at right out of the gate.
It really does highlight how much crucial information you can extract, even from initial impressions. When experts are testing thoroughly and directly addressing the kinds of questions you, the listener, would probably have.
So, thinking about all this, what does all of this early information mean for your expectations? Given the surprising potential of that Joy-Con mouse functionality, maybe even viable for third-party shooters or strategy games, as they suggested, And the confirmation that your existing game library will likely get at least a subtle performance bump. How might the Switch 2 change how you think about its capabilities?
Yeah, and will developers fully embrace these new features, like the mouse control or the extra power, or will some remain kind of niche curiosities?
It definitely raises an important question about how Nintendo and third parties will balance leveraging the new hardware's unique capabilities with ensuring a smooth and appealing experience for the entire library, both the old games and the new ones.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance.
And just like the expert said in the source, this initial deep dive is really just the beginning of truly understanding this console. There's always more to explore as more testing is done, and of course, as more games are released.
There is indeed. Lots more to find out.
And that's it for this deep dive.